Well, welcome to our group sharing circle at the Conan Doyle Centre, Edinburgh. Our sharing circle has a simple three-step structure to help us share our views as a group. Step one person speaks and the group listens. Step two, when we have finished speaking, we place our hand to the left to indicate to the person next to us that we have finished speaking. And step three, we have a little bit of silence between each speaker, 2 or 3 conscious breaths or 1 conscious breath. This helps us to sense the underlying energy field of the group. We have a time limit on each speaker, 5, 6 or 7 minutes maximum. Try to avoid naming other people in the group. We're going to begin with a 4-minute period of silence, just seated before we start. The first 2 minutes will be in silence. We suggest the eyes closed, and the second 2 minutes, a little bit of underlying music, and that gets us started with our sharing circle for today. We'll just begin with saying a few words, saying our name, David. Spiritual background. My mother was a spiritualist medium. So I was a background child to many, many seances, scores of seances. I was christened as a spiritualist. There was one book and 3 spiritual teachers that have had a big influence. The book is called Memories, Dreams, Reflections by Carl Jung, where he explains the significance of synchronicity, which has been with me throughout my whole life and has actually led me to the 3 teachers that I mentioned that have had the biggest influence. The first being J. Krishnamurti. I heard about 20 live talks by J. Krishnamurti. The second was Adyashanti, 2 silent retreats that I valued very highly, and a dozen talks by Adyashanti. And the last one is Eckhart Tolle, a German teacher. 2 retreats and about 16 talks. These have been the main influences from my spiritual background.
My name is Aurora. Spiritual background, I think I shared with you, David, spiritualist as well. My mum was as well a medium. When I grew up, birds paddling was very, very important in the house. I think the book that really opened my eyes was The Initiate. It's from an unknown author. And it was more or less at the same time with an experience of meditation when I was 16. And that opened my eye onto stillness, I think. And Edgar Tolle has been really important on my journey for the last 15 years, I think. And
my name is Bernard. My spiritual background, I was brought up in a very arid, sort of conventional Church of England way, which I totally sacked when I was about in my teens. And then for about 10 years I did nothing. Then I stumbled upon Alan Watts' book, The Wisdom of Insecurity. That really got me thinking on all sorts of levels, and I became very heavily involved with the work of Ram Dass, who I loved, and I went to various retreats and read an awful lot, listened to an awful lot. But then I felt that I wanted to have more of a local satsang, and the spiritual path came to me. I was looking, but it came to me quite unexpectedly. It was an Indian path that had its roots partly in the Sufi and partly in the Hindu tradition, and it was called Sajmad, which means the natural way. And I liked the practices of that very much. And there was a small group that started in Edinburgh. This is back in the early 90s, I think. And I was very involved with that for a number of years, and got to the stage where I was teaching the meditations and things like that. And then the next stage, I did a psychotherapy training that was based on Buddhist psychology. And so I learned a lot about the Buddhist stuff. And then which I actually work with. But then more recently I discovered Eckhart, and for me Eckhart is wonderful because it's so simple and there's no dogma and there are no beliefs. It's all purely experiential, what arises from the experience. And so so that's where I am. That's me.
My name is Willie Bell. I don't come from a spiritual background. I play music, which I feel is very closely related to what we're talking about. I've read a few books on the subject. Krishnamurti, Freedom from the Known. Also Eckhart Tolle, Power of Now. I've just finished reading a book by the author Elliot Shafak, which has made quite an impact on me in its simplicity of paring down the complexities of life to the present moment and being here and now, which is for me very important. And music is paramount for me in expressing how I feel. Words are limited, but I feel I express myself much in the musical background, either individually or in a group of musicians where we will tune into one focal point, and that is what I feel when we mention the word meditation. It's a meditative process, music, for me.
My name is Marie. When I consider a spiritual influence, it's a difficult kind of resting place, because the one that I suppose influenced me most was Krishnamurti. And I don't want to be, and I don't feel he kind of takes you on a spiritual journey, if you like. But he was and is an influence in my life, simply because it's not known as anything, as far as I feel, not even as a spiritual influence or spiritual journey. I think this unfolding in me has been absolutely experiential. It's been at every moment of every day in my life and continues to be that. But certainly I've been to Rockwood, where Krishnamurti built his magnificent retreat, and the energy there is unimaginable, indescribable, and the vibration that he's left there is still very much alive. So yes, I suppose in that, Krishnamurti was and still remains a vibrational resonance to my, in inverted commas, spiritual journey.
My name's Gavin. In terms of spiritual background, my parents were Christian, practicing Christians. So I always had a sense of presence of God, or God being talked about. I went through a sort of usual sort of process of Sunday school when I was 4 years old till 11. And then was around 12. My mother had an interest in mediumship, and she was a member of the Spiritualist Church. And I remember reading a book that she had related to that. And I suppose I then began to feel and be exposed to other ways of looking at spirituality or reality. In the 70s, early 70s, when I was about 12, 13, and came across Krishnamurti's work in a local library, which had a collection. Someone had donated a collection of his books. initially read some Buddhism and then sort of worked my way through the Krishnamurti section. And like others have said, eventually went to hear him speak. I suppose he's had the most influence on me. I've also been interested in Adyashanti and Eckhart Tolle and Sadhguru, because I went through a period of just feeling I wanted to explore and actually more be a part of different contacts with different people. And so Sadhguru was involved with, not as a member of an organisation particularly, but did sort of yoga practices every day for about 2.5 years. And more recently, I think I probably gravitated more back to just silence as being where it's at. It's
My name is Violet, excuse me, and I think I'd probably like to start where I am rather than where I've come from. And most recently, I've been doing a lot of spiritual healing. I'm an accredited healing medium with the SNU. Prior to that, I've done various modalities in healing, spiritual healing, starting with Reiki probably, various other things like energetic magic, which I just love the name of. So my spirituality very much is connected with kind of feeling into energy, feeling that. I've also been meditating, I don't know, 40 odd years. Started, as many people did, with TM, and then explored various other modalities, Tibetan, Buddhist meditation, various teachers. But the most profound spiritual teacher on my path has been Adyashanti. I've only been lucky enough to be to one of his satsangs in one retreat before he retired, just before COVID. I host an Adyashanti gathering, which I've been doing since about 2019. We used to meet in person, I think probably once a month on a Saturday, and then come lockdown, we started to meet every Saturday, and then we started to meet every day. So now we meditate online Monday to Friday from 9 o'clock to 9:30. Saturday we do a book group where we look at Ajah's books. We look at a chapter every week. And we still do the gathering. So there are various other spiritual teachers that have touched me on the way. The most recent one, I don't know who would call himself a spiritual teacher, someone called Jonathan Ashford, who I came across when I was researching near-death experiences. And Jonathan Ashford's story is that he was dead for 3 hours and had all sorts of experiences and is now back, and he holds Zoom talks where he talks for, well, he's online for as long as anyone wants to ask him questions. He doesn't charge for anything, but he'll take donations. And I also listen a lot to Buddha at the Gas Pump, and I meet lots of interesting, I don't meet them, I come across them there. And Jonathan Ashford was interviewed there, as was Adyashanti. He's been interviewed about 3 times. So, yeah, I guess that's me.
So we're going to move on to our first topic, which is exploring meditation as a group. trying to remember a quotation. I don't know if I've got this accurate. It's by Albert Einstein. He said, if I get it right, the true value of a human being is the degree of freedom from the conditioned self. And so we're all born into a collective field of condition. We belong to a tribal group, whatever it is, political or religious. It tends to be the group that's superior to the other groups. We're all born into a culture which tells us the central figure in our story is called me. And although most people might not realize it, we're also conditioned for the mind to continuously think, which affects everything we do, including this sharing circle at the moment, our ability to hear clearly. And one of the recommendations from the history of spirituality to reduce the thought activity is this word meditation. And there's so many different ways we can approach that word. I'll mention something. I think children are attracted to meditation. I know the teacher Ajashanti as a child would experimented. He liked to sit cross-legged. Experiment. I did a Skype session with a young woman called Enzabita, spiritual teacher in Australia, Adelaide, who's written a book called Always Already Here. Enzo was brought up in Sicily. And when she was 5 or 6 years of age, in the early evening, she would disappear and people would go hunting for Enzo. And they would find her, she'd be lying on top of the roof, flat roof, either her own house or the next door neighbour's house, staring at the stars. Without knowing that, this was her meditation. The teacher, some of us mentioned today, Eckhart Tolle, when the parents living in Germany, when they separated, the divorce, the father took Eckhart to Spain as a young teenager, 12, 13 years of age. He liked to lie on the balcony in the evening, staring at the stars. This, without realizing it, was his meditation. And a well-known figure from history, Joan of Arc, when the king says to Joan, "How is it you hear these psychic voices and I, the king, don't hear these voices?" She says, if you were to lie in the fields in the early evening staring at the stars and you could hear the sound of the Angelus bell after it stops ringing, then you too would hear the voices. I think there is a natural attraction to meditation in children, which sadly is not encouraged in the society that I've been brought up within. So as we get around the circle, I like to focus on education, meditation and education, young children, adults in the workplace, particularly in an NHS. If you've ever been in the accident and emergency of the NHS, it's like a war zone. The relationship of meditation to physical pain and the relationship of meditation to psychic abilities. As we go around the circle, I'd like to touch on some of these aspects.
Thank you, David. About meditation and young children, I can speak of my own experience. As a kid, I remember my grandparents living on a hill, and I would enjoy that. There was a meadow, and I would go into the meadow. And I was about 4 or 5, and I would just lie amongst the high flowers and the high grass and just be there for hours. They knew this is where they would find me all the time, and I didn't know what I was doing, but it occurred to me a few years ago that yes, these were my first experiences with meditation, unknowingly. And then knowingly, it was in school. There was an open days. I was 16, and there was a free class of relaxation meditation. And I thought that was quite something unusual, you know, in high school to have access to that. So I went to that, and wow, I was blown away. For the first time, I felt like I was one with everything. My body melted into the ground, and the ground melted with all the rest. And I was like, wow, this is this is amazing. And then I kept the practice of meditation for a wee while, because just to repeat that experience, and the experience would always come back wherever I would be, sitting on a chair, I would become one with the chair. But gradually it faded away, and I thought I was not doing meditation right. And because I was not having the experience, and I was like, well, if there's no experience, there's no meditation. And this is where I didn't know I was, you know, that was the next step of meditation, when there's not necessarily anything happening, but you're just being present, and there's nothing. But it took me a few years to get back to that, and I think there's a gentleness to bring to yourself. When you're sitting for meditation, and to not be expecting, you know, something extraordinary. There can be plenty of thoughts. There can be nothing. There can be anything. And it's, yeah, I'll stop here for a moment. Thank you.
Yes, I was with a lot of when I was young, I was brought up in the country, and there was plenty of space and time to go out and be with friends and alone in the fields and the woods, and look at the stars, look at the sky, look at the water. There was a lot of being because there was time to be. And when I look at my granddaughter, who was 11 and just finishing primary school, she has no space. Every minute is accounted for. And in order to access that space, you need stillness and you need space, really. And it seems that society has engineered it at the moment with so much emphasis placed on achievement and getting to the next thing and doing well with the next thing. Because if the children often don't have very much time, they're just being. And I think that's really sad, really. Because you see what comes from that way of being, really, or that way of not being. Yeah. And then, you know, when I work with people, sometimes they come along and they say, I've been starting to meditate. I'm not getting anything. and that way of thinking you've got to achieve something seems to even go into things like meditation. You know, I must have this vision, I must be able to feel this, I must be able to. And at the end of the day, when you meditate, you get what you get. And you either like what you get or you don't like what you get, but you're going to get it anyway. Mm-hmm. So you can't really program for it. And I find there's been more recently as I get older, and my life isn't as busy as it doesn't have to be as busy. And I do have more space and more time. And I really relish that I can actually sit. You know, I live on the top of the hill. with a wonderful view to with lots of sky and lots of trees. And I just love to sit there not in a formal meditation. I'm probably focused on my breathing, and I'm probably very sensorily aware, well, hopefully. And that does it for me, really. And then I remember what Mark Twain used to say. He used to say, when he was old, "No, I'm old. Sometimes I sit and think. And sometimes I just sit." And I think I've discovered that. And I'm not really seeking anymore, but I suppose I'm deepening and discovering more about what I have already found, I think. So I read very few books on spiritual matters, whereas I used to have a huge library of them. But I just find I don't seem to want to pick them up these days, but I stick with my inner experience. It feels good, and the more I can carry it into my everyday life, the better things seem to come behind me. Which doesn't mean they're perfect. I'm not looking for happiness. I'm looking for awareness and growth, really. Then happiness can come and go. But the sensation of stillness and peace, it's like in the Christian tradition, people talk about the peace of God which passeth all understanding, and it does pass all understanding. And it's very different from what many people consider to be peace in the context of peace and war. It's a different quality that I like to experience. I think that's me.
It is called meditation. For me, it requires no effort whatsoever, because it's minus thought. Thought doesn't exist in what we might call meditation. We don't think about anything. We listen. The awareness is always, you are the awareness. Music is a perfect way of meditating. Perhaps listening, but playing for me is meditation. Minus thought. There's no thinking about playing music. Sometimes, on a few occasions, we become the music. We're not playing the instrument. Something is playing you. And it all comes out. You can call it meditation if you want. There's no thought involved. There's no technique involved. You're not conscious of what you're doing. It happens to you.
I think when we're children, and when we watch children before a certain age, as they play and run around and have space, as has been described, they are in a state of meditation because they're not burdened by their thoughts or what they want to be or who they want to be. But in fact, they're just free. And that then is a state of meditation before they go to school and become burdened with rules. For me, I think meditation is a state of being, a way of life. It's here, available in the stillness in the silence that's here, always. So it's not something to go to. It's not something to be, to try. It becomes more initially, yes. We can get caught up in the idea of meditating and what that means to me, you, and her, and him, and them, and it's all nonsense, really. Because meditation, ultimately, when one finds what meditation is, it's not the word, it's a state of being. And we can get caught in word as a practice. But going beyond that, there's just stillness, there's just awareness. And that awareness is always and ever present in every moment. And we live life as meditation, as the children do, without the burden of a conditioned state. Freely, present, here, now. That's meditation for me.
Perhaps my first experience of a meditative state was I was 4 years old. A lot of people, you can have sudden experiences of grief, and had an intense experience of grief, and had an out-of-body experience. I was looking down on myself, being very distressed and kicking and screaming. But that observation was from a place of real, absolute calm and just seeing. And I think that probably stayed in the background with me throughout my early life, that no matter what happens in life, there's something that can contain it all. And as I was saying earlier, I became interested in Krishnamurti's work, and probably a lot of people have similar experiences. It's hard to, he doesn't particularly give out a method of meditation, but really everything he's talking about is that state. And the interesting thing for me was that I gradually understood where he was coming from, and I don't think I particularly formally meditated very much, but it was kind of integrated more into my life, although I would sit with my eyes closed and silently for periods. And sometimes reading Krishnamurti's work, I would have experiences of space seeming to disappear. Everything seemed very close, everything had a sense of oneness, something more division. And really that's, I suppose, the way I am in the world just now, a feeling of nothing separate. The whole universe, it took the whole universe to produce us as we perceive ourselves to be. And there's an incredible mystery around that. And for me, silence of meditation communes with that to an extent. And it's an ongoing exploration.
I'm kind of drawn to say that meditation can be many things. It can be a technique. When I learned transcendental meditation, you're given a mantra, you repeat the mantra, and you go into an altered state. And I listen to guided meditations, and they can awaken a feeling, a memory, an awareness. I think awareness possibly describes it more. It's when you're more aware of the senses, and certainly not caught up in the mind, but when you're meditating, the mind will frequently kind of kick in with something to pull you out, and that's okay. And there have been glimpses of when everything is energy and you're at one with that energy. But I don't live my life like that. And there's definitely silence is an important part of it. Because most people, probably all of us, going through the day, we have stories going on in our head. That's the human condition. And it's having an awareness of these stories and realizing that they are just stories which will arise and spontaneously disappear, and another one will come up and disappear. And it's just watching that and not being disturbed by it. And when I think about children as well, my granddaughter is at school in Canada, and in junior school, in kindergarten, they would get guided meditations. And I remember she came home one day really angry because they had changed the story, and she had really got into the story of this guided meditation. She really felt the space, and when they changed it, she didn't have the same experience. So there's something, children are being taught mindfulness, and I think this is a good thing. So also meditation for me, when I'm in a meditative state, I'm feeling the energy, I'm feeling it now in my hands. There's a play of energy, the body is energy, the mind is energy. And when we're at one with the energy, it's all just a state of grace, a state of beauty.
I remember I was at a place called Brockwood, listening to Krishnamurti. He's quite dynamic when he speaks. You've got an audience of 1,000, and he's delivering this talk, very emphatic. And someone shouts out to the audience, "But what about meditation?" And he says, "I'm doing it now." Now, as a younger man, 28 years of age, that was puzzling to me, because meditation meant you were sitting cross-legged. You weren't delivering a talk. How could? So obviously the word has a different meaning for this man, as it has for many people. So the question that came from that for me was, what is meditation? I went to one of my friends who was a TM meditation teacher and asked him the question. He told me how to sit, how to repeat, but he didn't tell me what my meditation was. And the Buddhist teacher didn't tell me what meditation was. He told me to do more meditation. He didn't tell me what it was. So setting aside a time in your life, 15 minutes a day, whatever, this only happened for me when I got that definition. The shift from thinking to awareness. Now I can start. Now the mind's on board. This is what it's about. The shift from a thought-created entity to an awareness-based entity. Also, there's different depths. Probably some of you have seen it over the years. There was a protest in the Vietnam War, a monk who sets fire to himself, who pours the petrol over his head, and he sits there, sets himself on fire. And yet that man doesn't flinch an inch. There's no nervous twitch. He just sits there and gently falls over in death. Obviously, the word meditation has a deeper meaning for that man than what most human beings are carrying. So we can be sitting in meditation at different depths, different levels. And it's very easy to go through the years at a certain level without asking, can I go deeper than this? I'll go back to the children. Got a little stone here, the palm stone. A friend of mine called Erin, when she was 12 years of age, I gave her a stone to put in her hand. I said, if you close your eyes for 2 minutes, not only do you feel the weight of the stone, you'll feel the energy of the tingling sensation in the hand. And if you sit quietly for another 2 minutes, you'll feel the sensation in both hands, including the hand that doesn't have the stone. And while you're doing that, you'll notice you're very much aware of your breathing. And now she's a teenager, she still remembers that, and she still puts that into play. Anybody listening to this who's a primary teacher, who's interested in teaching young children a step towards meditation, get a tray with lots of little coloured stones. The children will enjoy it. They put the stone in their hand. You don't need to fill their heads full of concepts about what meditation is and what it's not. They'll enjoy the game of it. When young, I noticed the memory came back to me when I was pondering this, looking at a caterpillar as a child. You give it your full attention, all the legs and the little, and then for the rest of your life, you don't really look at the caterpillar. You have the label, caterpillar. When was the last time I looked at a caterpillar with the same depth as an 8-year-old? It hasn't happened. I think that's where you get the Christian message of, unless you be as little children, going back to that pure perception, which requires the mind to be silent, or a degree of silence. And the next time round the circle, say something about education in the workplace for adults, particularly in hospitals, the NHS, the value of that. And meditation to assist people who are in severe physical pain.
In the shamanic tradition, a meditation is what is called the shamanic journey. So it is the trance state of mind. There's the drum playing, and the people go onto a journey. They have a non-ordinary reality experience. That's how it's called. But the way a shamanic practitioner will see life is a shamanic journey. There are signs outside of our own experience that are informing the world within ourselves. It's a lived journey. You just need to have the awareness and the eyes open to be able to see it. The world is reflecting your own reality. What you pay attention to in the moment says something about your inner world. Just to give a precise example, recently, I am not too much of a tree connoisseur. I don't know much about trees, but recently my eyes have been really taken towards beech trees. Every time I walk, I seem to be noticing beech trees, and I've been walking in the town where I live, and I've been noticing all of them when I feel like I've never seen them before. And I know this got a message for me to go within and to tell me something. This is going back to what several of us have said, that it's a way of being, that meditation. It's being aware, being conscious, walking on this earth consciously, being open to all of these experiences. And I've got two boys, they're 14 and 16, and going on to this idea of education. Because I am their mom, once I'm trying, just like what you're saying, David, about the stone on the palm of the hand. And when I do that with my boys, they raise their eyes, and they've been doing that for years. But it's strange because recently my youngest, who's 14, was going to do something he's never done in his life. And that was a big thing. He was going to do it on his own. He was going to be alone by himself for quite an extended period of time. And the night before, he was feeling quite anxious about it, but he didn't tell me. He didn't want to tell me he felt. But he put in practice all of the things I had told him in the past. In the morning, he said, "Mom, you know what? Your breathing techniques work." And, just sitting and not having any devices and just observing, how I was feeling within me. It really worked. And I was like, wow, I've been waiting for that moment for so long. What I mean is sometimes, and I think I've stopped trying to teach them anything, but I've been more just being myself when, if something is difficult and I need to move through that, I'll be, in front of them, I'll be I'll take a moment of pause and I'll just gather myself, as we say, but I'll be just very present with myself. And I think just being exposed to that experience has been quite teaching for them. And more than probably all of the words I've tried to say to teach them anything.
It's going back to the caterpillar. Sometimes if I have a client who is very dissociated, one of the ways I use to try and help them to become more present in the room is to get them to name things in the room that they can see or hear, but without bringing all their additional baggage. It's as extraordinary that as most people, many people, cannot see anything without a whole host of extra stuff coming to it. And when I work with that, I do it with things you can see, things that you can hear, and things that you can feel. And we go around 5 times, 4 times, 3 times, 2 times, once. And the difference in the presence is quite marked, really, and usually, well, in fact, it's always experienced, really. But, it's just it's a practice to actually to be able to empty the mind, to be able to let the thoughts come and go and pay them little attention so that they don't bother coming in so much. And of course, we tend to really interact with the thoughts, and then of course it gives them more power, and they fill up more of our space. And I was thinking about meditation as a word and a practice. And in my understanding, the Buddhists would say that the actual practice of meditation is a form. And of course, forms are not considered to be real, because a form has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And But what with meditation, really, for me, there is that underlying state that is always there, always there forever. And the form is you dip into it and you dip out of it. It's not that you start and stop. It's actually there all the time. But we can only contact it for so long at a time before we can start to be aware of it in all sorts of other daily activities, or when we're having an argument with somebody, or that's the, yeah.
David, you used the word depth, going deeper. There's no effort required to go deeper. There's no thought involved. It does happen. It will happen naturally, through nature, through kindness, through thoughtfulness in the sense of thinking of others before yourself. One of compassion. Meditation. Being a musician, I link that with playing music, and the music and the real deep meditation is playing you, or in a dialogue, the meditation is speaking your words for you. There's no preparation. It happens naturally. There's no effort, it's effortless. It happens constantly all around you. You mentioned the word aware. Yes, of course, that's very important. That's crucial in this whole thing, as far as I can see. But depth might be, we might be sidetracking ourselves by thinking in a measure sense. I don't think that's relevant. I can see where you're coming from there. But as I said earlier, I don't know if you're familiar with a piece of music called Meditation by Antonio Carlos Jobim, a Brazilian composer. It's a love song called Meditation. His love of his life has gone somewhere else, but one day she'll come back. So he writes this piece of music in a meditative state, in a state of meditation, of love and kindness. And they are reunited. You can call it meditation. It might be one explanation or one interpretation of the word. But it's open to question, of course.
So I just want to say something about, since we've started to talk about meditation again, that listening to someone who spoke earlier was saying that when he's with his client, then to kind of like adjust their nervous system by making them or allowing them to be looking, touching, feeling, seeing, hearing in the room, kind of brings you into some presence, which is absolutely the way meditation works. I'm a meditation teacher. I taught meditation for 3 years before I went traveling. And that's exactly the practice, in inverted commas, that would take place. Now, this practice that we discussed that meditation is very, very important. When you begin to become curious about this other state, this quiet space. And it is important to just kind of allow people to feel, to sense something where the mind can be quiet for a moment. I see this. But ultimately, meditation is a state of being, as it was described, when it deepens, when it's revealed to you, it reveals itself. It's not about trying to become a meditator, which is really a distraction, is an add-on to our already conditioned state. But ultimately, to deepen in that state, there is no word of meditation. It's just being here.
Just as we're going around the circle, I felt a shift in my awareness. And I remember as a child, my early experience was I lived next to a main road, and I used to love if a motorcycle or a car, solitary car, went past and just trying to see how long I could manage to hear it. And it's that a periphery of perception that's so delicate. And present. And I think someone was mentioning earlier on about the oneness of your senses. And that being part of what I experience as meditation. And just integrating with life. It's nice to sit quietly. Here, sitting quietly is wonderful. And part of life.
To bring it back to meditation in hospitals and meditation or a spiritual practice when you have pain or experiencing pain, I think if you have a spiritual practice and meditate and you're in hospital, then that's a really good advantage. I have volunteered in hospital doing hand massage, and I have a friend currently who's in hospital and is now transferred to palliative care. I've also offered hand massage and Reiki to nurses on a nurses' day. And there's not really a lot of room for introducing meditation or healing into a hospital setting. It's very much drugs and surgery and that kind of treatment. I think if and probably when I find myself there, I will certainly draw on the practice of meditation and spiritual healing. That I do see staff who come in who are very kind, very loving, very open, especially in the hospice. There's a lot more of that. So I don't know if it's something that could be offered and introduced. They have pastors that come in and are available, but people have to ask for them. And there's it's like introducing meditation to the general population is much better than it was. But, even a few, maybe 20, 30 years ago, meditation was something that was considered weird and, not kind of mainstream. So I think there's definitely space for it to be introduced, but I think people have to come to it and to be ready for it. Because quite often people explore meditation and they say, I can't do it. I'm not having these experiences. Nothing is changing for me. And I remember the first time I sat down to meditate was in a stately home that I'd been invited to by my yoga teacher, and there were about 20 people there, and we sat for 30 minutes in the dark. And I sat there and was really acutely aware that I kind of was gulping, swallowing all the time, and nothing happened to me at all. And the woman next to me said, "Oh, that was wonderful. I went up through the clouds and met my spiritual advisor." And I'm thinking, well, nothing like that happened for me. But here I am, 40 years later, and I meditate every day. I've yet to go up through the clouds and meet my spiritual advisor. That's not to say that it won't happen one day. So there is a practice. I think it would be unusual for someone to say, I want to meditate, and for them to feel deeply and have a depth to the meditation that you get when you've been practicing and exploring and just sitting with it and opening into awareness. So, yeah, there's definitely, I don't know, but it's not something that can be, it has to be something that people come to themselves rather than being given to them as this is something you will do, this will benefit you. But it is more aware, it is more available certainly in palliative care than in hospitals. And so I think that's a good thing.
The spiritual teacher I mentioned earlier, Enza Vita, her name was. I did 2 Skype sessions with Enza. She said, I died in a meditation class. When she woke up from meditation, she couldn't remember her name. She didn't know where she was. There was a strange man looking at her. She didn't know it was her husband. She was ill for a month. When she got out of bed and went for a walk with her husband, Leo was walking the dog in front of her. She shouted out, "Leo, I am everywhere." So the impact associated with that word, many of us are going for 20 years with a peacefulness that's pleasant and worthwhile. It's like traveling on the motorway at 5 miles an hour, but you've got a 10,000-mile trip. And we're getting used to that. So it's worth listening to the people who, like Eckhart, 80% of his thought activity is gone. That's his statement. I remember telling that to a therapist, and she actually physically jumped. Because you don't hear that when you're doing therapy work normally. So there's definitely different depths to meditation. One of the things Krishnamurti said, which stuck with me 50 years ago, meditation came like a morning mist. And I thought, I don't remember any other meditation teacher saying meditation came. And it's only in the last year that I can verify that is a reality. It was a reality I thought only happened when you were out walking in nature, perhaps. I didn't expect it to be in the back bedroom. You're sitting in a chair. I'm ready to move chairs to do what we call meditation. But before I can get off the bed, the energy comes in the door, it comes in the room, the deep peace comes into the body, so I don't get to that chair. So that verifies that experience, a deeper experience, because I've done 70 years plus and that hasn't happened before. I've had once, I've had to watching myself sleeping. This is because the eyelids take very little to open, especially with a high pillow. And you see the body's on automatic, the breathing's on automatic. And you can't move your hands and you can't move your legs because the brain's not operating. You're asleep, but you're watching sleep. So there's something within you that doesn't sleep, that's always there, that ground. And then that never happens again. We go through another 40, 50 years. But it validates the fact that your mind has actually woke up just to see what it was like to be asleep. Sounds strange. You've seen the body asleep, but you're not that body, that which is perceiving. The education of children, I'm coming from a background where there was no schools, there was no education system gave you the option of going for a meditation. The little book we have today on the floor, it's written by Peter Russell. Strongly recommended, How to Meditate. I haven't got the titles in front of me. It's an Eckhart Tolle edition. It's really it's a book that you can take into a classroom because the objections to being in the classroom are usually it's not Christian, or we've got more important things to do. There's no scientific evidence. Now, Peter has worked with Stephen Hawking. The evidence, you can look up the website and you'll see plenty of evidence. This is a man who's meditated with the monks associated with the Dalai Lama and the Maharishi. And so there's a lot of good backing for people who maybe want to shoot down the possibility of children being educated once a week on a meditation class, particularly primary children. Every primary school had a garden once a week for an hour the kids could plant, and every primary school half an hour of relaxing meditation. The difference that can make to the mental health. The accident emergency in the hospitals I've been into recently, 95 people in a room and one young woman trying to deal with that. And 5 doctors, people waiting for 7 hours, lying on floors, and the stress, the burnout of the people working in that hospital, Someone in the hospital, they could bring in a meditation period, or someone near the hospital will offer it free to the people who are working in the hospital. When you go on YouTube, there's a lot of things take place under that heading, meditation. The teachers that most of us are familiar with, if you had close contact with Adyashanti or Krishnamurti, the one thing you can see, they're all alert. They're relaxed and alert. That's the main qualities. When you go on YouTube, the alert has almost disappeared. Everybody's got the relaxed part. But there's long synthesizer sounds. I've been in groups, Buddhist groups and mindfulness groups, half the room is falling asleep. And the teacher's not pointing out the importance of being awake. So we're using the same word, but we're losing contact with the deeper essence, the deeper pointers towards true meditation, if you like. So I think we'll go around another once. Anybody has anything deeper to say on the topic, then we'll go for a tea break. The tea woman is nodding, so that's official. Another, if anybody has something more to say on the topic, we'll go around it.
I don't know if I have got much more, but I think it's been said many times that yes, meditation is a state of being. It's a presence. Some people may have even that presence without knowing that they are that present. You can see sometimes some nurses in hospitals, because this is what you were talking about. they are extremely present with their patients, and they bring something different, you know, and it's or you go to your GP's practice and you know that you prefer to go with one GP rather than the other one as well. There might be energy, but there might be also an element of presence, knowing that you'll be heard, you'll be listened to with one more than another. So it's a real state of well-being, and I would really agree as well with this idea of being awake. It's not only being relaxed, but there's an alertness. There is and it's being able to walk on this earth with that alertness, with that awareness, and not just about. I think a lot in the spiritual world there is this love and light and peace, and no, there's the shadow as well. You've got to walk through that shadow as well with your full awareness, with your full being, and to be facing all of that. But it requires presence, and it requires alertness. Yes.
So several little things. Thinking about meditation, people who want to have experiences. I remember I was with one of my teachers, and somebody came up to him, wanted to tell him about the wonderful experience they'd had in meditation. And you know, they'd done this, they'd been there, they'd seen this, they'd seen that. And my teacher sat there and said, "It's truly remarkable. You know, I get nothing." But it was such a teaching, really. It was such a teaching. Two other things, but senior moments, like sometimes I don't always hold them in the memory. This is horrendous. Yes, going about the state of meditation. I mean, I used to find that often, and for myself too, going deeper, inevitably meant going to sleep. But obviously there's a state of consciousness, and that we, our normal everyday consciousness, there's sleep which goes underneath it, and then there's the awareness which rises above it. And of course, if you look at great spiritual teachers, there is a lightness about them, a presence of lightness and awareness. They're not heavy at all. They're very I mean, we used to be told in some conditions, if the person sitting next to you, this is in, when I was in big gatherings of several thousand people in India, if the person next to you starts snoring, just dig them in the ribs. But it was never actually quite acknowledged. I suppose people just were where we were with it. And I have to say that if I sit down to meditate and I'm tired, I could go to sleep too. So, which is fine, because sleep was more important than awareness at that point.
What you said, David, regarding hospitals, NHS and all of that, I think I gather from what you said, meditation is the medication. That can help in what you just described, in the mayhem and the chaos, all of that. But also, we haven't talked about channeling, a conduit, coming effortlessly, no effort involved in any of this at all. This comes into, it might be controversial to say, I have a class on meditation. Why do we want to? Can it be taught? That's the question. I pose these questions. People come at it from different angles. One of, I want to help this person. Point out a few things. Are they asking me why am I always miserable, worried, etc., etc.? Then in the best way that you can, try meditation. What's meditation? It becomes very complicated, something that we have in our being. We have a meditation.
I think it's just been spoken about falling asleep in meditation. I really loved that remark, and that in that moment, my tiredness was more important than meditation. And I think that's just so refreshing, because that's life. And whatever happens, we have to live, as has been spoken already. We have to live in this world, and we have to have a life. But it's basically, I truly understand it's how that life is lived. And that's the state of meditation. Living as that's the aliveness that's there in every moment. But we have to live. We can't go off on some woo-woo, but I have to meditate now because I've only done whatever and blah, blah, blah. Just to be with whatever is here. And not trying to become anything other than what's here. And so we can fall asleep when our body needs it. And we can laugh, or we can cry, or we can be in pain because our body is in pain. And we can watch, and we can understand that my body is in pain. And we can be aware of that. And it doesn't take the pain away. The body is in pain, the body is suffering. But from that state, it allows us to be still, that we're not adding to our state of pain, but we are there, and that allows a sense of connection with our body. I hear you, I'm here with you. I think going back to the children being taught meditation within hospitals or any setting, the question has to be of who is it that's teaching and how is it being taught. Because if it's someone, a teacher, who is part of the structure of the school, or someone who's been taught that I can do meditation and therefore I'm going to teach meditation, then nothing is happening. It's adding to concepts and ideas of this is how it is, and I can do this and I can teach you. There has to be space where the teacher, in inverted commas, is not doing anything other than just being present. And if we're teaching, in inverted commas, children, it's so important that the person who's holding that space understands what meditation is.
It's nice just not to know anything. Always liked the expression beginner's mind, associated with Zen tradition. Just to acknowledge in the moment that knowledge doesn't have to be active. Just observation. And maybe noticing reactions to what comes up. but where's that may be coming from, some conditioning or whatever. It's nice just to want to know. And of course, that isn't the attitude in schools quite a lot. So, but we all know about possibly the tradition that has brought that about. A religious tradition that probably isn't in touch with the present moment. It's more interested in knowledge and the passing on of belief. But teachers don't need to engage with that. And hopefully there's a way forward with that in schools.
When we started this, and you were asking, is there anything else that you wanted to say about meditation? Two things came to mind. One was the many apps that there are now that you see people, on the bus or on the train or whatever in the morning listening to a meditation before they go into work. And they're listening to meditation for calm, for the ability to, to focus when they get to work. And, that's how a lot of people, I think, see meditation. It makes you calm, it makes you focused and, more productive or just more at ease with your life. And, I think a lot of people come into meditation through those ways and for those reasons. The other thing that came to mind was the transmission that is possible to receive from a teacher. Or someone who is awake and enlightened. Hasn't happened to me as yet, but I've heard of stories, and I think I've been in the presence of people where you feel their energy, and I think that's an important aspect of our discussion. There's the kind of the two different sides. One is the very practical, and the other is the spiritual. And as I've become more involved in the spiritual aspect of it, I found that I'm able to look at various religions that I dismissed previously as being male-dominated or rigid or, 100 reasons why I dismissed them. And having arrived at a spiritual place, calmness and awareness, I can now look at those different religions and see that the various practices that they do can all be arriving at the same point, the same feeling that is evoked in me through, reading Adyashanti's books, doing meditation, discussion. And so the entry point can be very different for a lot of different people, and whereas before I would dismiss it as being incorrect or somehow they haven't found the right way yet. Now I see that there are many ways, and what I have is a way, but it's not the way, and I think that's a very useful awareness for me to hold.
Meditation, I think being in touch, even as speaking at the moment, being in touch with that which is prior to thought, as we speak, as we go around the circle. It's not, we want to speak about fantastic experiences, but the experiences do let us know that we're not just repeating words in a book, which we're all educated to gather words and regurgitate. You can read 100 books in meditation. At least the experience has given us something discovered that we've never known before, which is not coming from memory. But being in touch with that which is underneath thought, that's the essential part. I'll give you one experience I had in 30 years of meditating, as it were. I was just in the back bedroom and it was like an eclipse. Suddenly the outside world became dark. It was frightening because I didn't want to open my eyes because it had gone black. It's like someone goes to their work every day and they go down to the basement in the lift. But suddenly on this day, it went a floor lower, a floor that doesn't exist. And I didn't want the doors to open because I don't know what's down there. So I'm sitting there. The focus was on the breath because there's fear. When you're on the breath, and very slowly the darkness faded. And then when it came out of that, the mind's go, what on earth, what was that? What happened? Something like 2 years later, I'm watching a YouTube video. It's the teacher's called Francis Lucille. And somebody asked him about different depths of meditation. Yes, he says sometimes, he says, during the year, occasionally he says, I go down to the depth where you're actually in touch with that which was there in deep sleep. I thought, that's it. I knew it was the same experience. So it's not that you're encouraging people just to take this up to get super experiences, but it is giving you a taste of the importance of discovery rather than just repeating what you read in the book. Has anybody got anything else to say? This young woman over here.
Cup of tea?
Cup of tea, yeah, that's the one.
Thanks, James.